Welcome to the Economy magazine at I-24 News, where we give you a daily view on global business and innovation from the Jaffa Port in Tel Aviv. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. On today's program, Adrian Wooldridge, the Economist magazine's management editor, joins us from the Herzliya Conference. We speak on the top trends disrupting and reshaping our world economy. But first, let's start with the headlines. Asian stocks rebounded from their three-month lows on Wednesday. Still, the possibility of higher borrowing costs in the U.S. and persistent concerns over Greece weighed on confidence. The MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan rose 0.8% after hitting a fresh three-month low. Japan's Nikkei eased 0.1% to three-week lows, while European shares were expected to drop even further. But in the late hours of trading, they appeared on track to break their six-day losing streak. Britain has approved a £1 billion tidal power plant in Wales' Swansea Bay, this according to the Department of Energy and Climate Change. The project is set to create a 750-meter lagoon-shaped seawall, which is set to generate enough electricity for over 150,000 homes. Up to 26 low-head bulb turbines will be installed inside concrete turbines permanently submerged in the water. Each one will be built with a gate staying closed only until the water level on either side is high enough to pass through and generate electricity. Well, in tech news, Chinese e-commerce giant Alibaba apparently doesn't want to fight for U.S. market share. Instead, it's planning to help small businesses in the United States sell more goods to China. That's according to Jack Ma, the company's chief executive. Well, Ma is in the U.S. this week explaining Alibaba's global strategy. On Tuesday, he told the Economic Club of New York, quote, "We're not coming here to compete."
China's been focused on exporting in the past 20 years. And I think next 20 years, China should be focusing on importing. China should learn to buy. China should spend the money. China should buy a lot of things from globally. And I think that American small business, American branded products, you should use in the internet, go to China.
And tech titan Apple finds itself in the middle of an antitrust probe. Investigators in New York and Connecticut want to know whether music labels colluded or were pressured into going along with Apple's paid music subscription, released to the public on Monday. Apple Music, as it is called, provides a $9.99 streaming service that is expected to completely transform the way consumers listen to music. The music industry has now been grappling with falling demand for music downloads for years. In other news, elephant poaching has plagued much of southern Africa, but Botswana has implemented a new approach which could be providing now a success not just for the country's elephants, but also to its tourism economy.
The Chobe River is a piece of elephant paradise. Massacred in their tens of thousands for their ivory tusks, the continent has fewer than 470,000 left. But here in Botswana, with its unfenced parks and wide open spaces, about a third of Africa's wild pachyderms have found their sanctuary.
These animals are highly intelligent. When they're being disturbed in another area, they will move to where they know they're going to be safe. And in the case of Botswana, a lot of our elephants are essentially political refugees, fleeing persecution in neighboring countries.
The secret to this success is sheer political will. Slightly bigger than France and with a population of just 2 million, Botswana enjoys immense expanses of wild terrain, from the Kalahari Desert to the Okavango Delta. And the government has prioritized quality ecotourism as a sustainable source of income, even more so than its diamonds.
Botswana's lucky because it's got such a great landmass of national park. In South Africa, for example, they're so small and privatized and so commercial that you're never alone, so you've always got a lot of other tourists around. Whereas Botswana, you can be in Moremi and not see another car for the whole day.
Botswana has got a bit of a more higher income, lower volume policy, which we really like. We rather prefer working with quality products. And then I won't say it's your upmarket guest. I just think it's your guest that really wants to come here.
Last year, the government banned commercial hunting and has adopted a zero-tolerance approach to dealing with the ongoing poaching that has plagued so much of southern Africa.
If you come into this country with a weapon to shoot one of our resources, if you are going to leave and think you'd leave with your life, you're going to be disappointed. And I'm not going to apologize for that. It is the way it is.
Man and beast coexisting side by side doesn't always work. For some villages, elephants can be a crop-destroying menace. But by redistributing the wealth from state-sponsored tourism projects, like this park and cultural centre in the northern town of Kasane, Botswana hopes to protect its natural heritage.
Moving closer to home, at the Herzliya Conference, an annual gathering attracting big names in business and economics, we got the chance to meet with the Economist magazine's management editor, Adrian Wooldridge. He has some interesting views on what he says is transforming the world economy. Now, for analysis, let's welcome in the studio our very own Daniel Roth. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we both got the chance to go to the conference. What were the highlights for you?
This is a big deal. Of course, there's lots of politicians, lots of big names in business. One of the big highlights actually happened to be a panel moderated by Mr. Wooldridge, focused on Israel and the global markets. And it was really an interesting kind of look at where Israel is at today, where the world is at today, and the two points of focus were, one, technology, the disruption that technology represents, and both the challenges and benefits of that, and two is BDS, the growing kind of call for boycott and the growing isolation of Israel in the global market. These were two big foci in the panel.
Great. Well, what was the outcome of that, these two trends that are hitting each other?
It's interesting. It's a point of debate that's really interesting, and I think we're going to see months, if not years, more of this kind of debate about where Israel really stands, where the numbers really point to.
Great. Well, how would you describe the atmosphere there at the conference this year?
Excited. It's you know, like I said, it's really, I don't think it's an overstatement to say one of the bigger conferences of its type in the region. It's certainly the biggest in Israel of this kind, and really focusing the world's attention on politics, economy, and really sort of world-changing ideas.
And who were some of the big names?
For me, Yossi Matias of Google, George Shapiro, someone we spoke to, the CEO of Airbus. There was, on this particular panel, which was this was the one I really went for, again, happened to be hosted by the person we're about to see a one-on-one with, but it was, this panel was really the core of it for me. It was a really exciting conversation.
Well, thank you for your personal take on that. Now let's watch that interview with Adrian Wooldridge. We are joined on set now by Adrian Wooldridge, a management editor at The Economist magazine, and he recently wrote a book about the global economy. It is called The Great Disruption. Thank you so much for being with us today. We do appreciate it. Well, in this book, you do highlight a number of trends which are currently challenging the current economic order that we see in the global economy. Can you please highlight those for us?
Yeah, there are three trends, really. One is technology, which is hugely disrupting the economy, but it's not just disrupting the obvious technology industries, it's spreading its effects out to other industries. So you see something like Uber changing the taxi industry. Many very stable sort of industries like education and healthcare are going to be disrupted by technological innovation. That's the first. The second one is globalization, the emergence of emerging markets now making up more than half of global GDP. Very rapid growth in India and China. That's just changing the balance of the world economy. So global companies have to look more and more at emerging markets. And finally, just the capital markets. You know, the amount of money that's whizzing around the world and the instability created by the capital markets is a huge factor.
Well, you do mention that companies like Uber here. Is that because of their big imagination or perhaps a lack of regulation on that front?
Well, I think it's because they've thought of it an incredibly big thing to do, which is that you can have a company that doesn't really own any taxes, it doesn't really employ any workers, but it uses an algorithm essentially to allocate people who've got time on their hands and people who've got cars that are otherwise sitting in their garages to solve big commercial problems. They're using the sort of spare capacity, as it were, in a very rational way. And I think we're seeing that throughout the economy, a capacity to identify and allocate spare capacity. Airbnb is another example of that. And think of Uber didn't really exist in 2008. It starts in 2009, and now it's in, 53 countries. It's got billions and billions of money, and it's investing some of that money in some incredibly futuristic things, such as it's just taken over a big chunk of the robotics industry. You know, it's investing very heavily in having robots, a future in which robots will drive your car.
That is surprising.
Yeah. Carnegie Mellon is now partnering with Uber and investing a lot of resources in creating robot-driven cars.
Well, since you mentioned that, and as well as Google is also involved in this, and I imagine a number of other tech firms, what is the future in that area? How are robots going to disrupt our world?
Well, I think in all sorts of obvious ways, such as we won't be driving our cars; they'll be driven by robots, which are probably much better drivers than I am. There'll be fewer crashes, and that will change a lot of very extraordinary things. If you think about the knock-on effects of robot-driven cars, it's not just that they'll be driving the cars; it's that they'll be parking the cars. So the car will drop you off wherever you work, at the doorstep, and you won't have to deal with the problem of parking the car, which is the biggest problem really, is parking the car, because the car will go and park itself, or it will go and drive itself out to the periphery of the town and park out there. So one of the biggest constraints on getting to work is not that you can't drive, but you can't find anywhere to park. That'll be gone as a problem.
Well, now let's move on to a topic closer to home here in Israel. Israel is often known as the startup nation, but do you think that it's eventually going to mature enough that it could be a tech nation, that there will be, the Israeli Google based here or the Israeli Microsoft, that they're not just going to sell out to these big companies in Silicon Valley?
Absolutely, I do. I think there will eventually become an Israeli Google or an Israeli Facebook, because you can become a big global company without being based in the United States, without being based in China, because the market for those sorts of products in particular are global. So the big problem you have to solve is the problem of turning a startup into a scale-up, into a big company. But that's not a problem just because you're a small country with what, 8 million people. You can operate on the major world stage if you're a small country or if you're a big country. I think there are other problems with Israel, which are not to do with the startup sector and not to do with the scale-up size. I think that you have a lot of sort of badly run conglomerates which sort of continue to exist, which sort of push up prices but don't provide very good services. I think you have a lot of state-owned companies which are a bit monopolistic and not very competitive. It all strikes me this is strange. This is the world's most advanced 21st century country in many ways, but it's also the world's sort of surviving 1950s economy. Some of it reminds me of 1950s Britain with some fairly old line conglomerates.
That is actually a fascinating point. I mean, in many ways, Israel is a merger or a point of the first and developing worlds, as we see. Tell us a bit more about The Economist and its role in influencing big economic thinkers.
Well, The Economist, which I'm very proud to work for, is a weekly magazine which focuses partly on current events, partly on economics and business. We do both of those things, which is unusual for mostly it's either a business magazine or a current affairs magazine. We try and do both. We try and write about the news, but we also try and write about big thinking, big think pieces. We were, I think, the first big global magazine to put the case for gay marriage on the cover, for example. We've put a lot of things recently on the rise of the sort of the fluid economy of which Uber's part, the on-tap worker. So we try and highlight big themes in economic development as well as reporting the news. And of course, like every other news organization, we're making the transition from just being a weekly magazine or just doing our regular old-fashioned job to being an internet presence. So we have to produce content all the time for the 24-hour news cycle as well.
Right. I was going to mention that. What kinds of initiatives have you taken to evolve your internet business? Well,
we constantly keep our internet presence updated. We tweet everything that we do, but we also produce every morning something called Espresso, which is a summary of the day's news. So you can get on your device, so when you're in your taxi or you're commuting to work, you can look at our summary of the 5 important events of that day and what to think about them. And we try and do it not just as a sort of a news service, but also as a views service, so that people have some sort of sense of at least what we think and what we'd hope they would think about.
Well, I'll be looking out for that. Thank you so much for joining us. Adrian Wooldridge, management editor at The Economist. Thank you for being with us. Well, Daniel, he makes a lot of interesting points there. What stood out to you the most?
Look, actually, I think there's something interesting about this interview was the kind of knowledge that he displayed on issues ranging from robots driving cars to some of the inner workings of Israel's economy that most international people looking in don't notice that side of things.
Right, this two-tier system.
Yeah, so, and I think that speaks to the importance of his publication, The Economist, in the world of economic reporting, in the world of analysis on global economy. And The Economist, which is over 150 years old, London-based publication, really seems to have its fingers on the pulse of what's going on globally. And so, I mean, this interview really exemplified that. Of course, they come from a kind of center-right position on most things, but one of the unique things is that they don't limit themselves to only that perspective, and they bring other pieces to the table.
Well, thank you very much for your insight as always. We will continue to look at The Economist regularly. That wraps up our global economic coverage today. Do stay tuned tomorrow for all the latest in global business and innovation news tomorrow. From the Jaffa Port in Tel Aviv, I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Thank you for watching.